Hi friends, let's dive right in.
The Senate chamber buzzed with tension as senators took their seats. The budget bill, a sprawling trillion-dollar package, was up for a vote, and the stakes had never been higher. Chuck Schumer sat at his desk, fingers steepled, his mind racing through the calculations. Every vote had been tallied, every conversation had been analyzed, and still, uncertainty hung in the air. This was not a bill that anyone wanted to pass. It was a compromise, stitched together with deals and concessions that left both parties unsatisfied. But politics was never about perfection. It was about survival, about making the best possible choice in a world where no choice was ideal. Across the chamber, Majority Whip Dick Durbin exchanged a glance with Schumer. They had spent weeks trying to secure enough votes, bending ears, making promises, and sometimes delivering hard truths. Even now, as the roll call began, Schumer felt the weight of history pressing down on him. "Senator Schumer?" the clerk called. He took a breath. Aye. The decision had not come lightly. 2 weeks earlier, in a private strategy meeting, Schumer had laid out the brutal reality to a group of key Democratic senators. "If we don't pass this," he had said, "the government shuts down. That means millions of federal workers without paychecks. That means veterans not getting their benefits on time. That means economic turmoil, and come election season, we take the blame." "But Chuck," Senator Bernie Sanders had countered, his voice edged with frustration, "this bill has major corporate tax breaks. It extends loopholes for billionaires. How can we justify this to our base?" Schumer had leaned forward. "Because the alternative is worse, Bernie. Yes, we lose some battles here, but we keep funding for healthcare, for social programs, for education. If we kill this bill, the next one will be even worse, and it'll be written by the other side." Elizabeth Warren had crossed her arms. "We're handing them a win. We're securing a longer-term fight," Schumer had corrected. "Sometimes, you have to take a step back to move forward." Not everyone had been convinced. Progressive Democrats had argued that rejecting the bill would force Republicans back to the negotiating table. Moderates worried that too much resistance would risk backlash in swing states. The pressure was intense, and Schumer had spent sleepless nights weighing the options. Back in the chamber, the roll call continued. One by one, senators cast their votes. The tally edged closer to the threshold. The bill needed 51 votes. If just a few Democrats defected, it would fail. Schumer scanned the room. Joe Manchin, ever the dealmaker, had signaled his support after securing concessions for coal state subsidies. Kyrsten Sinema had remained frustratingly vague until the last moment, but now she nodded slightly. She was voting yes. Across the aisle, Minority Leader Mitch McConnell watched with cold calculation. He had played his own game, allowing just enough Republican votes to ensure passage while keeping his party's hands clean. When the final tally was announced, 52 to 48, the chamber erupted. Some senators clapped. Others scowled. Outside, reporters were already spinning the news. Schumer exhaled. It was done, but the battle was far from over. The moment Chuck Schumer stepped out of the Senate chamber, the press swarmed like a pack of wolves. Microphones thrust toward his face, cameras flashing, journalists shouting over each other. "Senator Schumer, critics say this budget bill betrays progressive values. What do you say to your voters?" "Senator, the bill includes corporate tax incentives. How do you justify this as a win?" Schumer had spent decades in Washington. He knew the drill. He raised a hand, calling for calm. "This budget bill was not perfect," he began, voice steady. "But it was necessary. Let's be clear, this bill keeps our government running. It protects vital services, ensures millions of Americans keep their paychecks, and preserves funding for healthcare, education, and infrastructure." "But Senator," a reporter cut in, "some Democrats say you caved to Republican demands." Schumer's jaw tightened. "What we did was prevent a government shutdown that would have hurt working Americans. We fought to include provisions that helped the middle class, while making difficult but responsible compromises." He didn't expect the press to be satisfied. They wanted drama, conflict, soundbites that would spark outrage. But he had no time for that now. Behind him, Bernie Sanders emerged, walking briskly past the cameras. He hadn't supported the bill. In private, Schumer and Sanders had clashed over it, respectfully, but intensely. Inside Schumer's office, key Democratic senators gathered for a post-vote meeting. The mood was tense. Some were relieved. Others looked furious. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was among the first to speak. Chuck, with all due respect, how do we justify this to our voters? We gave away too much. Schumer met her gaze. I understand the frustration, but tell me, what was the alternative? Letting the government shut down? Do you think McConnell would have blinked first? AOC folded her arms. We could have pushed for a better deal. Schumer shook his head. Not this time. The numbers weren't there. If we held out, Republicans would have waited us out and proposed something even worse. They were willing to risk a shutdown. Across the room, Senator John Tester, a moderate from Montana, nodded. We had to think about 2024. A shutdown before an election year? That would have killed us in swing states. Cory Booker leaned forward. So what's the plan now? How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? Schumer exhaled. We have to win in November. The only way we stop playing defense is by expanding our majority. Elizabeth Warren finally spoke, her tone measured. Then we need a strategy to show voters why we made this choice. Because right now, a lot of them feel like we gave up too easily. Schumer nodded. We'll hit the media circuit. We'll highlight the wins in this bill, because there are wins. Childcare funding stayed intact. Medicare was protected. SNAP benefits were saved. We take that message straight to the people. The room fell quiet. They all knew the reality. Politics wasn't just about ideals, it was about survival. And this battle was far from over. The next morning, Chuck Schumer's schedule was packed. He started with an interview on Meet the Press, where the host wasted no time pressing him on the budget bill. Senator Schumer, progressives feel betrayed. Conservatives say you gave them too much. How do you defend this compromise? Schumer adjusted his glasses. Look, this is what governing looks like. You don't get everything you want, but you fight for the best outcome possible. We kept Social Security intact. We kept Medicare fully funded. We ensured that federal workers continue to get paid. I'll take that over a shutdown any day. The host leaned in. But some Democrats argue you could have held out for a better deal. Schumer's expression hardened. Held out how? Mitch McConnell and House Republicans made it clear they were willing to let the government shut down. If we had played chicken with them, it would have been veterans, working-class families, and seniors who paid the price. The interview made headlines, but it didn't silence critics. On social media, progressive activists were in uproar. Hashtags like #SelloutSchumer and #CorporateDems trended. Progressive organizations announced they were considering primary challenges against moderate Democrats who had supported the bill. At the same time, conservative media spun their own narrative. Fox News hosts framed the bill as a bloated Democratic spending spree, despite the fact that several Republicans had voted for it. Inside Schumer's office, his aides scrambled to control the messaging. We need to rally the base, his chief of staff, Mike Lynch, said. Get our people out there explaining why we did this. Schumer nodded. Have Booker, Klobuchar, and Warnock hit the Sunday shows. We need surrogates pushing our wins. But even as they worked to control the narrative, new problems emerged. That afternoon, Joe Manchin held a press conference in West Virginia, distancing himself from the bill even though he had voted for it. This wasn't the bill I wanted, Manchin told reporters. But Washington is broken, and I did what I had to do for my state. Schumer clenched his jaw when he saw the footage. Classic Manchin, always playing both sides. That night, Schumer sat in his office, staring at the latest poll numbers. Democrats were taking a hit in approval ratings. The left felt disillusioned. The right was already attacking. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Politics was never about easy choices. It was about making the best possible decision in an impossible situation. And now, it was time to prepare for the next battle. Days after the budget bill passed, Chuck Schumer found himself in the middle of a political firestorm. Progressives were still angry, moderates were nervous, and Republicans were already crafting attack ads for the next election. But Schumer had been in this game long enough to know that politics was about resilience. His next move had to be strategic. If Democrats were going to regain control of the narrative, they needed a plan, and fast. The strategy meeting. Schumer gathered key Democratic leaders in his office. We need to get ahead of this, he said, looking around at the faces in the room. Cory Booker, Amy Klobuchar, Raphael Warnock, and Hakeem Jeffries from the House. Republicans are already spinning this bill as a failure. The left thinks we caved. We need to show people why this was the best choice available. Jeffries leaned forward. We hit the road. Take the message directly to the people. Town halls, campaign stops, Explain what was saved in this bill. Remind them of what the alternative was. Agreed, Klobuchar said. But we also need to go on the offensive. The Republicans wanted to shut down. We need to hammer that point. Warnock nodded. Voters don't care about the procedural details. They care about what's in their pockets. We need to highlight how this bill protects jobs, Social Security, and health care. Schumer took a deep breath. Then we start now. The media blitz. Over the next few weeks, Schumer and his allies hit the airwaves. They held town halls in battleground states, speaking directly to voters. Ads were rolled out focusing on the bill's benefits, how it kept essential services funded, protected education, and ensured military families got paid. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Polls showed that while progressives were still frustrated, many Democrats were starting to see the bigger picture. The real test, however, would come in the midterms. The next battle. One evening, Schumer sat in his office, watching a political ad from a Republican super PAC. It framed the budget bill as a massive Democratic spending spree, conveniently ignoring the fact that GOP lawmakers had helped pass it. He shook his head. The fight never ended. Just then, his phone buzzed. It was President Biden. Chuck, Biden's familiar voice said. You did what had to be done. Schumer sighed. Yeah, but now we have to win the argument. Biden chuckled. We always do. Schumer hung up and looked out the window at the Capitol. The budget battle was over, but the war for the country's future had just begun.